Hi, good afternoon. Three things for you today. Something exciting and different from government. Secondly, a different perspective on how to use e-marketplaces, and I'll go on to talk about them more as media vehicles than perhaps just sales channels. And thirdly, if you're not familiar with the Department for International Trade, a quick walkthrough for how it works, the sort of services it offers, and perhaps a quick three-point guide to how to get the most from the organisation if you come into contact with it. Just to sort of kick off, two or three words about myself. I've consulted into the Department for International Trade for the last 4 years or so, and the e-exporting program, which is what I will talk to you about this afternoon, is a service/product model that I designed for the department. I also work for the World Trade Organization and private retail clients, mostly from overseas. So I've sort of done the piece where I've worked with officials and civil servants getting work through government, but I'm also very, very familiar with a lot of the issues that you encounter and want to address in day-to-day life. And my private sector background before this was variously at Sony, Timberland and Brompton, as well as advertising agencies. So without word of ado, I'm just going to talk by way of an introduction about the e-exporting program. And the important thing about this is it's actually a product from government, and it's given a not very romantic name, program, but this effectively enables it to be separated from a lot of the other services that government offers, and move it through Whitehall much, much faster. It is about e-exporting. It's about exporting on digital channels, and although this is predominantly about e-marketplaces today, it is by no means to the exclusion of social commerce or mobile commerce at all. It's just more a catch-all phrase that government has used to capture the key thought here. What I wanted to talk really about to start with is the internationalization context. There's a risk here I may repeat what has been explained this morning, but I think the number of key things are the rise of mobile, and with that the endless appetite for search online, and that is increasingly playing out on e-marketplaces as opposed to on search engines. And therefore e-marketplaces are becoming the go-to in terms of discovery for product in some markets almost exclusively compared with the generic search engine. The second element I'll talk about is the importance of this end-to-end view that has been built into the e-exporting program. And what I mean by that is that if search for a market or a marketplace starts here in the UK, it's designed to enable you to identify the supplier set or the candidate companies for you to consider paying services for, all the way through to marketing on the e-marketplaces overseas. So there's a golden thread that in theory picks you up here in the UK, and once you land on a specific e-marketplace, hopefully, all things being equal, there should be a marketing program being organised by government to help push you and get you an audience in that initial sellout phase. And lastly, I'll talk about the services and resources, because it's not only the UK, but it's an enormous embassy network overseas. So the big things driving online search are technology, Wi-Fi and that type of thing, but the big things driving search for UK brands are very simply the Union Jack. And what I mean by that is after the Olympics, Brand Britain got an enormous amount of coverage, and that's been further added to by the Royal Wedding, for example. And every time there's a major sporting event in the UK, the audience of the world tilts and looks at this country, be it Wimbledon, horse racing, Formula One, all those types of things. So it's a very, very good time to be selling a British product, a British service, a British brand overseas. And statistics from 2015, albeit a little bit out of date, show that year-on-year search for British companies has gone up just under 50% for the last 5 years, year-on-year. So that means that there is a massive demand out there for things from this country. As I said, that's driven a lot by the number of screens, and there'll be all sorts of reports to be found out there talking about the number of smartphones now, roughly speaking 3 billion, wind forward to 2020, 5 billion, wind forward to 2025, possibly 8 billion, 9 billion. So it's all about the mobiles and smartphones. And that in turn drives consumption of content, not only product-led content, but brand-led content. And so in this digital space that we're now operating in, I think it's very important to adopt the point of view of almost being a media owner in terms of how you move content across all these different channels, as opposed to just looking for an export market per se. And that is because audience development has become one of the most crucial criteria for early market entry success since really the arrival of digital. And what I mean by that is, had we been sitting here 10 years ago, possibly 15 years ago, we'd have been looking at maybe a consideration of which distributors to look for in Japan or which distributors to look for in South Korea. And that then drove a set of decisions which were about going to a trade show, finding a distributor, and then ascertaining which retail network that distributor sold into. Now we can row back from that and look at different ways of looking at things. And e-marketplaces provide a way into the market, but they are really only servicing an audience that's coming into that platform. It's very important to consider the audience that's off the platform and use all the social media and other marketing tools to build that total holistic audience. I think this is particularly applicable to the categories where it's very crowded and where standout is crucial. And the verticals I've listed at the bottom of the page there, ranging from fashion through baby, kids, homeware, Internet of Things, all the way through to consumer electronics, they've experienced tremendous growth. They're very, very crowded, and the importance of brand as a distinguisher. So a couple of points to bear in mind that lie behind this enormous shift to online search. The first is that in many, many markets, the infrastructure that is in place at the moment can't offer the sort of range that the web can. So often China is given as an example, but I think it's fair to say Indonesia and many, many countries in Asia, for example, are in the same sort of situation where the physical network of retail space is often not very up to date. Although that is clearly being overhauled in some areas. But importantly, what is stocked in that physical retail isn't a great variety compared with what somebody sees on a screen. So what's happening is people are saying, well, I don't want what's around the corner from me, I want to see what's on the web, and that's expanding their horizons and encouraging them to look and locate brands such as the ones that you own and manage. And as a result of that, the use of e-marketplaces as the go-to, where people sort of first see if something's available, is really, really on the up. And regularly we see points about the fact that Amazon perhaps takes 34% of online search. That's considerable. But in China, for example, Tmall and JD.com take upwards of 85% of search. So just park for the time being Tmall or JD.com in the sense of I need to be on them, but please consider them as in the fact that they are the major vehicles for discovery. And I think it's fair to say that if you were to look at Indonesia, Malaysia, so on and so forth, you'd increasingly see e-marketplaces being the places where, as being the destinations where people search. So what this means is brand is a key differentiator, and brand is a word laced with lots and lots of meaning and all sorts of things like that. But essentially, we were to boil it down to a very simple set of criteria. It's about quality, heritage, especially in this worldwide context, and through that possibly tradition as well, if you can sort of lean into that and use that as an equity. And those three elements enable you to drive deeper connections with your consumers, get to them earlier in the consumer purchase journey, and hopefully convert them more swiftly with a lower cost of acquisition once they come towards you. And a big part of that is opening up your budgets, your marketing budgets, to development of content. And what I mean by this is short films, and notably high quality audio visual films, as opposed to static marketing assets. I think in the time that I've worked alongside brands at DIT, I've seen there's still a very fixed focus on what I would call the lookbook and certain static assets, so photography, images, that type of thing. And what we all need to, I think, be moving towards is much more use of content. It's riskier because you've got perhaps bigger costs and that type of thing, but it's the content that flows, it's the content that gets moved around by consumers. So why can I stand here offering this point of view? Well, government is in a very unique position to see both supply and demand. It's a taxpayer-funded service. It's absolutely unique in the sense that it has all these embassies around the globe, and it has contacts and networks with yourselves who effectively represent the enormous store, the enormous supply of product that then can be taken to worldwide demand. And in the e-exporting team that I sit in, we're in a position to talk with e-marketplaces and understand to tremendous depths of detail what sort of channels consumers are using to search product off of those e-marketplaces, and then what the consumer journey is when they land on those e-marketplaces. And that brings a holistic view to the table as to how we can help advise you on e-marketplace selection, but also digital channel selection when you're going into these export markets overseas. So what we espouse, the approach we adopt is very much an omni-channel approach. And that is one around channels for sale, but also channels for communication. And that's where I think e-marketplaces become this slightly, they have a sort of blurred entity in a way, because for sure they're massive sales combines, they deliver enormous numbers of volume and that type of thing. But they are also a phenomenal marketing platform with lots of interesting advertising inventory that can be used. And apart from anything else, they offer great data, and it's the data mining capability that I think it's worth bearing in mind as part of the sort of consideration set for any marketplaces you may wish to approach. So I think you'll all be very familiar with these sort of fairly generic approaches as to how to go to a market in the digital space. There's call it a .com or a URL. There's a URL with shopfront, URL with marketplace, or a hybrid model, URL, e-marketplace and shop. And each bring with them certain considerations, customer profile that you want to target through SEO, maybe the limited reach that you might have if you're just looking at a shop or a retail experience overseas, as opposed to then wrapping that together with a web-based presence. And then e-marketplaces perhaps ring a few alarm bells because of maybe the technical integration considerations that they involve, and indeed the costs involved and that type of thing. But essentially, what I tried to lay out there is a way of looking at sales channels which are increasingly moving into the domain of being media channels. And the reason is that in that last box under e-marketplace, there aren't really many other possibilities to sell nationally when you go into a market for the first time. And I'm coming at it from the perspective that you either might want to migrate your businesses with a distributor and sell and move beyond just selling through physical retail to selling nationally, in which case an e-marketplace may give you an option in that direction. Or you may be looking at market entry, and you may have a number of regions or markets that you want to look at, and by selling nationally through a mobile-first approach on an e-marketplace, you can go into the market that much more swiftly and get your learnings out that in a much more concise way than perhaps the old model would have done using a distributor. So the government service I'm now going to talk about, which is the exporting program, is very much this hybrid sales, marketing and data collection vehicle. So it's about the audience that's available on an e-marketplace. It's about commercial terms that government has negotiated for British sellers, using government's muscle, if you like, to hopefully make the cost just a little bit easier to bear. It's about what we call great activity. Great activity is marketing, and I'll show you some visuals of that, which we use to give a sort of springboard to British brands on the platforms. And then it's also about all the learnings that are available through the exporting program that can be made available to you through the team in London or through the team at a regional level, depending on where you're based. So this very simple diagram is intended to explain how the thing works from an end-to-end perspective. Overall, when I designed it, I imagined myself being in the office here, not wanting to travel anywhere in the globe because of the budget, maybe not wanting to put the budget into travel and that type of thing. How could this service be designed to be nimble and give you a very quick view of what avenues to pursue, what avenues to maybe put on hold, and those to ignore? So I've sort of used the parameter of saving time and costs, but also optimize your market entry. So come with me, if you will, on a little bit of a journey. The Yo Sushi model, the image on the left, is this idea that there are lots of e-marketplaces out there and they chunt around. They're all looking for brands. They're all looking to entice you into their ecosystem, because e-marketplaces need you as brands either to launch vertical categories on the platform, grow those categories, and more importantly, sometimes to actually provide differentiation for them versus the competition. So as brand owners, you're in a very strong position when it comes to discussing your launch plans on a marketplace, and I think that's a really, really important thing to bear in mind. But essentially, this service enables you to map and see what sort of e-marketplaces might be appropriate for your business. So it's about visibility of choice. There are, roughly speaking, 450 B2C e-marketplaces worldwide. The channel is changing all the time as you have acquisitions and new ones come on board, but that's a world of choice. And there are, of course, very well-known ones, but there are lesser well-known ones which might do a good job for you. The next thing is the enablement piece. Now, in the past, government has focused a lot on getting people into a market, and then in many ways, the people in the market then had to get on and do their own thing. And inevitably that takes time. It can also potentially lead to a few false turns and that type of thing. So the enablement piece that's part of this program is a very precise index of supplier service companies that work into the back end of each e-marketplace. So some of them, such as Amazon, I'm just going to use that as an example, are pretty much, it's a model where they pick up from you and they look after everything. Other marketplaces offer you the traffic, but you need to find all the supplier services to get yourself onto those platforms. So the point of this index of suppliers is enable you to see A, what supplier services you need for a given marketplace, perhaps see 2 or 3 candidate companies you'd be interested in approaching, but importantly, you get that as a comprehensive view. You're not presented with a situation where you see the e-marketplace and then you've got to go away and research all this. So it's designed to be really, really compact and as helpful for you in your sort of discovery phase as possible. And then the last part, assuming, for example, that you've gone through, elected to go on maybe Rakuten in Japan, a big platform there. You've used the necessary service providers to ensure your presence. The end part of the journey is that when your brand is on the platform and there are a suitable number of British brands ready to go, government will then place a wrapper around those, which uses that great graphic there in a number of different ways to boost the initial presence of your brand on the platform. So I hope that what I've described is clear. But essentially, you can choose, you can then find out who you need to work with to then activate your presence, and then you get on-platform marketing support. So this is what it looks like if you go onto the .gov portal, and I put the web link at the bottom there. You can go on there, and at the moment there are a selection of 42 e-marketplaces to see. You then get effectively a detailed breakdown of all the different elements to consider about that marketplace, ranging from commission, how they accept goods, how you get paid, timeline for payment, that type of thing. And then that visual on the right is what one of these great campaigns looks like when it's played out on an e-marketplace. And that triggers awareness for you, that triggers early stage sellout and trial. This is then just a very quick view of what the slides look like. I just wanted to show you some live examples here. You find your online marketplace, you can spec your category, your countries, that type of thing. It then gives you, in some cases, three rolling pages of candidate e-marketplaces, and then you'll see the top right box there. It says tip for DIT advisor there. There's a little bit of information that talks very specifically about some of the considerations that you may need to bear in mind with that platform, such as what service providers do you need to locate. So as I draw to a close, some examples of the activity that we've run on these platforms, and this is unusual because, as I say, government doesn't tend to advertise in the market to help British companies, but we've managed to negotiate these campaigns on platforms such as Lasso in Japan, Amazon India, Shu.com in China, Mihabao in China there in 2016, and then latterly, just before Christmas, with Newegg in the US. And as I bring this to a close then, I think if I can just bring to your attention, there are about 450 of these marketplaces. So importantly, the government service just has 42 at the moment. I'd love, honestly, to have scaled it to 400. But maybe that'll come. But the important thing is the ecosystems are different, so keep a watch out for that. Fixed and variable costs vary a tremendous amount, so in terms of business planning, have a wary eye on that. And your third-party supplier requiremements, they change, even between a well-known platform in Europe and, say, if you then use that platform in Asia. So to sum it up, what this should hopefully enable you to do is plan, so you have a single view of all B2C marketplaces worldwide. We, government, work increasingly to lower your costs of market entry. That could be for lower advertising rates or changing commission models. Saves you time and money both before you go to the market and when you get there. There are a lot more digital native advisors in the Department for International Trade Advisory Network now, and crucially the support goes on to delivering marketing on the platforms in market. Just to finish up, the central team that I sit in essentially looks after the negotiations with the marketplaces, loading them onto the service and running great campaigns. But across the nation, across the United Kingdom, there are about 220 international trade advisors, all of whom plug into the central team. So any question they have that they can't answer, we'll send it up to us, we'll process it and send it back down. So there's a lot of support available. And one last thing to suggest is that you look at how you're branding your products and services using the Union Jack, because the research that government has run, this dates to 2016, but there's another dip going in this coming summer, shows that purchase intent or propensity to buy goes up by up to 13% when product or services are linked in some way or form with the Union Jack. Now, great, the campaign that you saw me show there, that's government's version.